Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is David. Today we're going to continue our personal profile website. In the previous section we have finalized the hero part, and also we have done the about section, the facts section, the skills section, and the resume section. So in today's tutorial we are going to continue this project by building the following portfolio section, which is also one of the highlights. The highlights of this section is that it contains a filter facility. If you click on one of those filter buttons, it allows you to go to the category that you want to watch only. And also, there's a GlightBox zoom in effect for each portfolio image. If you click on the plus sign, it will give you that zoom in model, and you are allowed to switch from one to another, and also it's swipeable. The third highlight is that it has this link. This link is supposed to lead you to the individual portfolio item page. However, with the functionality provided by GlightBox, when you click on this one, it opened that page as a model, alright? So, but it doesn't mean that this page doesn't exist. This page still exists. So say for example, if I go to localhost 3000 / portfolio /1, it'll take you to that first portfolio individual single page. That page is there, alright? But for simplicity, because we are building a profile website, just imagine your potential employer is viewing your portfolio and you want to see the details of the work. If you get the employer to go to another page, that might get him to lose the contract, right? So for them to focus better on your project, what we're going to do is to open up this project link as a Modal, which gives them a better user experience, all right? I'm going to show you how to build this one as a Modal. Other than the portfolio, in today's session, we are going to build our service, the testimonial using Swiper, and also a fully functional contact form that allows the user to make the post request to the backend API, so all the contact message can be stored in our database. Alright, so if you're excited about my tutorial, please subscribe my channel. Let's jump in and do it right now. To start off this portfolio section, we're firstly going to make the data ready. So we're going to the file. In the data folder, we opened up the data file, and then just below the previous data, copy and paste in the data for the portfolio. I briefly go through the data structure. For each portfolio item, we're going to have an ID, and we're going to have the preview image routes, and then we're going to have the gallery. The reason is because when you go to the portfolio, go to the detailed page, there's going to be a gallery for that individual project, right? So each gallery loads 3 images in a carousel. This is why we need a gallery array to store those image routes. And then we're going to have a title for the portfolio item, a brief introduction, and also the category. I leave this two blank for you to fill up your own portfolio title and brief, but I do put in some mock category. If you have your own category, you can change the name accordingly. Alright, so this is the data structure, and as you can see, we have 9 items in the portfolio. If you got more, you can just keep adding items into this array. Okay, in real life, you probably want to have this data stored in the database and then make the request from the database over there. Once we have the data ready, we close this off. The next job is to build a component for our portfolio section. In the section file, create a new file, and we call it portfolio.tsx. So that's going to be our section file, RFC, to create a boilerplate. And at the same time, in the same folder, we create another file called portfolio.css. And then we're going to import this CSS file back to the component file, portfolio.css. Alright, so now these two are linked together, and we know that if you look at the portfolio, the entire section is one big component. However, for each individual item, they all share the same kind of design style, which is a card design style. That is going to be an individual portfolio item, so which is another component. So what we're going to do here is inside our component folder, create a new file called portfolio.item.tsx, RFC, to have that boilerplate ready, and then at the same time, portfolio.item.css to have the styling file ready, and then we're just going to import that CSS file back, portfolio.item.css. Alright, so now we have the component file, the child component file, and also the CSS file for each of them. Okay, this is our logic so far to set up the portfolio section. Our next job is to create our API RESTful API endpoint so that the data can be fetched from the backend. So what we're going to do, you can go to this API folder and create a new folder called portfolio. Each folder represents one route. If your folder is named portfolio, basically means you will have one RESTful API endpoint route named localhost 3001/API/portfolio. So you must name it correctly in a readable way, okay? And then inside the portfolio, we're going to create a routes file. Create a file called route.ts. So this will be used to hold our portfolio data. And what we're going to do is to import our portfolio data over here. And then we're going to export async file function. We're going to make the GET request from the backend. So we write a route to handle that GET request. This is going to return us with response.json portfolio data. Alright, the logic is quite simple. We get the data from the static file, and then we make sure that our backend routes convert this data into JSON format so we can see it on the backend API. If this thing's working, we should have that route ready. So now let's just go here, open up a new one and say localhost 3001, because we're now on the localhost 3001/API/portfolio. Enter. Yeah, as you can see, our data has been successfully loaded, which looks exactly the same as our static file, except all this data comes in JSON format. So when we make the request to the backend, we're going to make the request to this route and get a JSON data and convert this JSON data into JavaScript data and load it on our front-end template. That's the logic. Alright? But on top of this, we also need to build an individual single route for each of the portfolio item, because after all, we do have the demand to go to each individual page. Like so, this is going to be the detail 1, and this is going to be the detail 2, as you can see. So we must have the individual routes for the backend as well, which is a get single request. Okay. So what we're gonna do, open up your editor, close off this route for now. We're gonna make a dynamic API routes inside the portfolio folder, and the way to do so is to create a new folder inside the portfolio and call it a square ID. It must be wrapped by a square bracket so that Next.js will know you are making the dynamic routes for each individual item. Alright, enter. And inside this ID, the square ID file, we create a new file called route.ts. Sorry. Somebody may say that you already have the route file outside. This is different. One is contained in the portfolio folder. The other route file is contained in the square ID folder. It's different route file. One is to handle the entire portfolio data. One is to handle each individual portfolio data route. Okay, they have a different job. Enter, and then we're going to write a bit of code for this one as well. So what we're going to do is to import our portfolio data, this one, from our data static file, and then we're going to write a function, which is a get single function, also going to be the async one, a function with the name of get. And here we're going to have some kind of parameters and types. So we're going to firstly deal with our first parameter, which is going to be an underscore request, and that is going to be the request type, because we are handling requests from the front end. The other one is going to be our parameters, and that is going to be our params. And this one, we're going to do an object structuring and define its data type. For each params, it's going to be an ID. It's going to be an object that contains the ID, and ID is going to be a string. Alright, so now you have defined the data type for each. Inside the function body, we're going to handle the individual request. What we're going to do is create a variable called constant portfolio item, and that one equals to portfolio data. We're going to find from this one the portfolio data. We're using the JavaScript higher order array function find. If you are building the genuine project, you do not need to write this. Here you should write a code to talk to the database. Say for example, if you're using SQL as your database, which is a relational database, here you probably want to write select something from where. Okay, and that's going to be a selected request to a database. If you're using MongoDB, which is a non-relational database, you're going to find the relevant information from MongoDB. But here, just assume that our database is the static data file, so we find the information we need from the data file, writing these functions. It's up to you, all right? In the future project, I will introduce how to connect to a genuine, real database, and how to set up the connection to the database, and how to make the request to the database. But for this one, we'll just leave it like so. And find. So inside this array, inside this find function, what we're going to do is we're going to do a item. And we know that item is going to be with ID number. And we know that we're going to find this one. Item.id. When you get the item's ID from the data from the portfolio data, that is going to be a numerical value, right? But we know that the parameter has to be a string, so we need to convert the data type to string. Basically, say that to string. So convert it. If that equals to the params.id, so here we do a mapping. If this condition got satisfied, we're going to pick up this type of item. Basically, this is the way for us to use the find to find the target item we want, by matching the item ID, and the ID has been passed in as a parameter. All right, so that's how we find it in the array. So now you have this one done. The last job is to make the return. So now we return response.json. So we want to response the find item in a JSON format. That's going to be our portfolio item. Oops, not the data item. So we do the searching using the JavaScript find function, and once we found the item based on the ID, we assign it to the variable called portfolio item, and then we're going to convert it into the JSON and put it on the browser. All right. So if this thing has been done successfully, what I'm going to do is to try on this route localhost 3001/API/portfolio/2. Let's try it out, and then very successfully we have get that individual item for 2. Basically means that our get single request has been working successfully. The next job is go back to our code editor and go to our portfolio item to create that individual item template. Have a look at the original one. Each individual portfolio template is going to be in a card with some hover effect and contains the link and the plus sign. All right. So now we are building it over here. To do so, we're going to first import the use effect hook because we're going to use it. And then we are also going to import the GlightBox from GlightBox. Yeah, we're going to import from the GlightBox and the GlightBox object. And later on, we're going to create a new object for it. And then we know that each child component will take that property item, and we have to set up the item's value and declare its data variable type. So we're going to say each item is going to be an object with the ID of number, and also we're going to have the image, which is going to be a string because we are holding the image routes, not the image body itself. And then we're going to have the title, which is going to be a string. Brief, going to be a string, and category, going to be a string. All right. So now we have all the data defined in terms of the data type. And the next job is for us to set up the template. So we delete the original one. And over here, I'm going to say for each individual portfolio item, we're going to create a column of 4 on large screen -4, and column on the medium screen is going to be -3, -6, sorry. And we're going to give them a customized portfolio item, customize the class name, so we can manually handle the style of it. That's our column. And inside, we're going to give a portfolio wrap. Like so. And the first thing inside the portfolio wrap is going to be our image. So we say image with the cells. And we know that this is going to be accessed from our child component, which is the item image. And give them a class name of image float. This is the bootstrap thing, which will allow your image to be fully responsive. And then alt, maybe we want to use the image title. So we say item.title. So now we have the image done. And below that image, what we're going to do is to create another div called portfolio info. And inside this info, we're going to have the h4, which is used to contain the item title. And then we're going to have the paragraph, which is going to be used to hold the item brief, like so. And then below that is going to be our link. So we create a new div called portfolio-links, inside which the first ink is going to be held by the anchor tag. So we say anchor tag. The ref is going to be item.image, and the second thing is going to be a class name. Oops, not inside the curly braces. Class name. And the class name is going to be portfolio GlightBox, because we need this class name to handle the GlightBox animation effects, so that you can turn on and off that modal. Alright? And the title, give the title as a property, and that is going to be image.title. Okay, so that's our first anchor tag. And for that plus sign, we're just using that box icon plus sign, which is going to be okay. This is our job. Maybe we assign one last property called the data gallery, portfolio gallery. And the last one, below that, this is our first portfolio link. Below this link, I'm going to put in another portfolio link, which is very similar to this one. Because remember, when you look at the original project, you will find that there's a two link. One is the plus sign, allow you to have the zoom in modal. The other one is the link button, which will allow you to have the modal for that individual page. So below this anchor tag, we put in this one. This one will give the reference to that portfolio individual routes /portfolio/item ID. And this one is going to be this one we just built, /portfolio/ID. Going back. And you also have that customize the class name, portfolio detail lightbox, but we have to set a data GlightBox type external, and also make sure that the title is item title. Everything remains the same, except we use the link icon, not the plus icon. So we're pretty much done the template for the portfolio individual item. The one last job is going to put in our GlightBox setting. So we use that use effect hook in React to deal with the GlightBox setting. We create a new GlightBox target with the selector of the portfolio GlightBox. This selector contains the class name of the target of the element, this one. If you give a class name to your link GlightBox, portfolio GlightBox, this one have to match this one. And also another new GlightBox with the selector period portfolio-details-lightbox. This one match the next one, because we have two links, each one with a different class name. The first class name is portfolio lightbox. The second class name is the portfolio detail lightbox. And we have to use the selector to make sure the GlightBox can find out those two elements on your DOM and create that modal effect. However, the second one, we want to make sure the width is 90%, height is 90% as well, because it's going to be larger. When you look at the project, the second one will pretty much take the whole screen, which is pretty large. However, the first one will just show the standard modal, which is going to be a tiny one in the center. And that's how you control the size of the modal using GlightBox. Alright, so this is going to be some kind of advanced setting for your CSS and for your animation. But once we're done, we're all good. The next job is to put in our portfolio item CSS. So what I'm going to do is to copy and paste in our CSS file. And make sure that for each portfolio item, you give them the correct margin, and make sure you have that correct transition. You have that pseudo elements to make sure you have the hover effects. Say for example, if you hover on it, you will see that white shadow comes out, give you a semi-transparent effect. This hover effect is achieved by this pseudo element. And for the information, you make sure you have the correct position as well, alignment, font size, everything. So I just slowly go through these. You can read yourself. And after all, we are building a Next.js advanced project. We are not running a CSS tutorial, so you should have the capacity to understand all this code straight away. If you have troubles of understanding these, I strongly recommend you to go to my vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript project demonstration. There you will see how to type up the CSS code from the beginning and explain each line of the CSS step by step. But here we just want to focus more on React and Next.js instead of the CSS. Alright, so I go through all of them so you can have a look. It's all basic, very basic standard CSS, not much more complicated. Alright, so that's all. And the CSS file is done. This one has been linked in. The GlightBox is set up. Everything looks good for me now. I close this off. And our next job is go to the parent component, which is the portfolio, to do the data fetching and also the data mapping. So here in the parent component, what we're first going to do is to import few hooks. One is the use state hook. The other one is the use effect hook. Because we are using the use state hook, basically means we're going to change the local state, and that has to be in a use client, make it a client component. And the next thing we're going to do is to fetch data. And to do so, we're going to write some local state variable to deal with the storage of the data. Say, for example, we create a local state variable called data and set data to manage the change of the state variable. And that's going to be equal to use state hook. The initial position, the initial value of that state variable is going to be an empty array. So once we've done the data loading, we're going to fill that array with the JSON data that we fetched from the backend. The second one is going to be the items. Items is going to handle the change of the data because we do have the filter function on our page in terms of the portfolio. If you click on any of the filter, the data mapped onto the DOM should be changed accordingly. So that's why we need another local state variable, items, to handle the filter change effect. And that is also going to be the use state hook. Initially, it will be an empty array as well. So once we have those two done, our next job is to write our function to fetch the data. So we say const get portfolio data, and that is going to be an arrow function. And inside this arrow function, we're going to write a fetch. So this fetch is going to contain our routes that you want to fetch data from. So going back here, we're just going to fetch the data from these routes, localhost 3001/API/portfolio, to have the whole batch of the JSON portfolio data at once. So we put in this one. So once you fetch the data, the next job then, it'll return you with a promise. And we're going to consume that promise by getting the response and using the arrow function to turn that response.json. Basically means that you will convert the JSON data into the JavaScript data. And then what we're going to do is to set a data. So here we're going to say data will change to another one. Maybe we want to say it is as a portfolio. This name is customized up to you how you want to name it. And we say set data, and that is going to be portfolio. So we get a data and we put that data into our local state variable using this part. And so once we've done that, it should be okay. But just think about what if we encounter any errors. So we're going to do a catch function. Say if we encounter any errors, so far we're just going to console.log.error. In a real project, you'll probably want to put this one on the browser. Maybe you can install a third-party library called Toastify. You can toast it out on your browser to notify the person who encountered this error. But for our demonstration, we're just going to leave it in the console. Alright, so now we have our function ready. The next job is to trigger this function using the use effect hook. The use effect hook handles the animation or the behaviors when the component first gets mounted on the DOM. So here we write a arrow function. I set up a template first, and inside this use effect hook, we use an arrow function to call the above data fetching function, and we say get portfolio data. We call it, And this function will only be called once because we injected an empty array. Basically means that the use effect hook will depend on nothing to be called for a second time. And this is only going to be called at the very beginning time when the section, the portfolio section, gets mounted on the DOM. And also, when this gets mounted, not only we want to fetch the data and store it into the local state variable data, but also we want to do another job. What we want to do is that we want to set the item, which is another local variable, to data. The reason is because the first data is used to store the original data that we fetched from the backend. The item, the local state variable item, is going to handle any changes, like if we do the filter, the data mapped onto our browser is going to be changed. So this one is going to handle any changes, all right? But we still want to keep the original data, do not want to touch it. When we need a copy of that, okay? That's why we have two local state variables to make things much easier. And this thing has been done for now. And the next job, I want to set up the template for our portfolio over here. Okay, so I delete this one. What I'm going to do is to write a section. And for this portfolio section, we give the ID of portfolio and a class name of portfolio. And also we give them a section BG. So make sure it's have that section background color. Okay. And the next part, we know that everything must be wrapped in a container for it to work. So it's going to be div container. This is the bootstrap container. And inside the container, the first thing we want to import is going to be our section title. So we say section title. And here inside the title, we know this is going to be a portfolio. And also we're going to have a brief property to have that brief paragraph to explain what this section is about. So I'll just copy and paste in that Lorem paragraph. Now we have our section title part done. The next part, we're going to set up the body of our portfolio. So we create a new row over here. And inside this row, we'll create a 12 column LG for large 12. And we want to make sure that it has that centralized display flex. So we say dflex, justify content center, like so. And inside here, we're going to firstly create our portfolio filter using the UI and give the ID name portfolio filters, like so. Inside this filter, what we're going to do is to create those filter buttons, like what you can observe over here. Those filter buttons, this is a separate component. But just have a think about how you want to create this filter component. Are you going to hard code all these words? Later on, if you change your filter category, you're going to have to change these words as well. So we still follow the principle separating the UI template from the data. We do not hard code our filter category over here. Instead, we're going to create a data file for that filter inside our data.ts file. So going to this file, I copy and paste in our filter data. As you can see, it's only 4 categories with a name, category, and active. Only the first one has been set to active by default. The remaining are all false. Okay, very simple. We close this off, and we know that we're going to use this data. So what I'm going to do is to import that filter from the data. So we can use this one over here. And then over here, inside this UL list, we're going to do the mapping. Curly braces indicate you're going to write a JavaScript code, and then filters.map. So what we're going to do is map it into filter, which is going to be an arrow function. And inside here, we're going to write a list item with a key of that filter's ID, .id. And inside it, we're going to write the filter's name, filter.name. Okay, so that's pretty much what we can do so far. What I'm trying to do now is that we have write a whole lot of code, and I want to test out if this one's working. If we have written errors before this, so we know that we can debug something. So the next job for me to do is to put in that portfolio section here. and to see if it works. Yep, as you can see, there are some tiny errors has been picked up. After I refresh, the errors gone. Yep, it's working. So we have the portfolio title, and now we have the subtitle. We have that filter as well. The filter looks pretty ugly. That is because we haven't input any CSS yet for the portfolio. So what I'm going to do is to handle this CSS is purely to handle the portfolio filter actually. Filters. So we have that give them a certain padding, remove the bullet point, and also give them a certain border radius and some background color. Transform the text to uppercase, and make sure it has some hover effects. When it's hovered, and the color should be changed to the same color. That's all. And when you go back, you will see this thing looks pretty much good. But the one thing you'll probably notice is that the first thing should be set to default, should be set to active by default and show in blue. The remaining are in black. However, this CSS is not reflected. And that is because if you look at the CSS file, we do have the filter active class name to handle the color of the text. But here we didn't use that class name. So what I'm going to do is inside this list, add in that class name. But this class name has to be conditionally rendered. Only the one that is active will be given a class name filter active. Otherwise, it's going to remain the same. And what I'm going to do is to write a backtick. Here I say using the money sign, curly braces, to say if filter active is true or not, query. And if it's true, we're going to add on another class name called filter active. Otherwise, we're going to say undefined. Okay, so once you add on this class name, everything should be working. Now we're going back and see this all the blue color has been added. The remaining three are all in black, but the hover effect is okay. Okay, this is how you can handle the conditional styling. And one more thing is that we have to, after we build the filter, we need to build the body of the portfolio itself. Okay, so our next job, below that filter, so below this row, you find the first row. Below this row, we're going to write our second row. So div.row, which is another row. And we're also going to give it a customized class name called portfolio container. So now you have this one done. And inside here, we're going to do a mapping for our item. We know that we need to fetch data from the backend routes, which is this one. And once we get the data, we set a local state variable into the data that we fetched from the routes. And now we have to map that data into the portfolio item. The portfolio item we have built previously over here. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do a mapping using the curly braces to wrap it. And we say items.map. And inside here, we say item. We're going to map it into, we know it's going to be the portfolio item. This one. Close that off. So now this thing has been successfully imported above. But you can see there's some curly braces, curly lines underneath. That is because we have some error. We know that this one is going to take a key, which is going to be the item's ID. If you look at the JavaScript, the JSON, each item has its ID, right? Each item has its image, gallery, and title, all those properties. And then we're going to pass in the item itself as a property value to it. So now we have the ID, we have the item itself. And if you look at the portfolio item, you know that the item gets tagged in must have all these properties. Okay. So the next job, because we are using TypeScript, we have to define the data type for this item. So instead of saying item, what I'm going to say is item, define its data type, like so. So now item is going to be the variable that we use for the mapping, and we define the data type of it, the variable type, and also this is the map the thing, the portfolio item. After define all the data type, the error will gone. Okay, so this is the mapping that we do. After we've done this, let's have a look at the project to see if it's working. Let's reload it a bit. Yeah, it seems like the things has been successfully loaded with all the image, but the problem is that the size of the image and the the layout of the image doesn't look correct to me. Let me just try to fix that real quick. I double check the page and my file. It looks like there was a typo before. This is supposed to be image fluid, img, not the full words. So this is the Bootstrap class name that will allow you to have that responsive image. And once we've done that, we're going back to see, wow, everything has been loaded correctly for now, and it looks much better with that hover effect. Okay, our portfolio layout has been set up and it looks all okay. But the thing is, if you click on one of those filters, you look at it, nothing's going to change. My original project, if you click on the filters, only the one that belongs to that category will be presented on the DOM. The remaining one will disappear. How do we handle this filter effect? And also, whichever filter you click on, the color of that filter should be turned to blue, and the remaining 3 will be changed to black. How do we change this one? So it's quite a bit of animations to handle, right? So now let's just go back to our portfolio. The job must be done on the filter. The filter must have a on-click event to be triggered. And we say that create a function over here to handle that on-click events. We could say const handle filter change, which is equal to an arrow function. So we leave that function for now, and we copy this function name over here below the class name. We write a on-click events like that. So whenever the user click on it, we should handle the animation of the filter. First, we need to filter item that we want to show to the user. Second, we need to change the filter button's color to the one that has been reset to active. But to think about it, this handle filter change will take some parameters. All right. One, you have to tell the function which one you have clicked on. So we must pass in the filter's ID. And also, we want to filter out the categories of the item that we want to show only. So the second thing is going to be the filter category. So we pass in this too. It pops up with an error. That is because whenever you put in parameters, we have to use the arrow function to trigger this function. Okay, filter ID and also the filter category. Those are the two things to think about. And since we put in these two parameters over here in the function, we must define those parameters as well. So ID, which is going to be a number, and also category, and that is going to be a string. So once you've done that and you look at it, this error line has gone. This is the beauty with Next.js and the TypeScript. The TypeScript is a very strict programming language. If you have any errors or any incorrect things, inaccurate things, it will pop up with the error. All right. And the next job is going to write our function inside this handle filter change. Let me show you. So we write a if function for now. So we're going to check which button the user has clicked on. If the user has clicked on all, we should present all the initial data to the user. So we're going to firstly check if the category triple equal to, triple equal means that the value and the type must be the same, triple equal to all. If it does, what we're going to do is to set our item, the local state variable, to the initial data. This is why we have two local variables. The first local variable data is to hold the original data that we fetched from the API. The second one is going to handle the animation changes. Alright, if the category has been clicked on is all, basically means that we want to show user the initial original data. That's why we set all our items to the data. Okay. Else, if the user click on some other categories, what we're gonna do is to do a filter and only filter out the category that the user have clicked on. So we say data.filter. This .filter is also a JavaScript higher order array function. And inside here, we're gonna use the item, have to define the type of the variable, category string, and we use that one. We're going to filter out the item.category equals to the category that has been passed in. Okay, it's a very simple function. This category is the parameter category. We're going to do a matching. We're going to go through each object inside the data array and find out which items the category equals to the category that has been passed in over here. If they matched up, this thing will be picked up and show it in the array. The remaining thing will be hidden. That's how the filter function works. Alright, here we just do the thing as a whole. You use that item to do the mapping and to do the filtering, and you have to define the item's data type. So once we've done that, and I think the thing should be working. If we're going to the, maybe I refreshed a bit. It looks like it's not working yet. Let me check. Yep, I have just found out where the error is. We only did the filter of the data, but we didn't reset the local variable. Remember, when we do the last data mapping, we use the items local state variable to do the data mapping. So whenever you change the data, you must do the reset item to change the local state variable. So what I'm going to do, first you can say maybe you want to write a variable like this, say new data, that's going to be const, and on the second row, over here on the second row, you say set items to new data. You can write it in that way. So basically, you do the data filtering first to get a new data. This new array contains only the one that has matched the category you put in, and you reset items to the new data that will update your local state variable. Okay, and if you done this and you go back, you click on the filter button, it's actually working now. All right, we have no problem. But a more advanced way of writing this, let's see if I can go back to the initial position. Yeah, this is where we left off last time. So we just cut this line. Instead of reassigning to a new variable, which will cost you memory, we just say set items to the entire thing. Because this filter, eventually, after the filter, it will return you with a new array. And you just need to set item to the new array. That's it. This is only one line of code to handle the filter effect. As you can see, it is still working the same, without any problem. Alright, we've done this filter. The second issue we're going to have to handle is the color of the button that has been clicked on. The one that has been clicked on should have the active status, and the color of the button should be changed to blue. Alright, the remaining should be changed to black. So what we're going to do is inside this handle filter change function to write a bit more code, but my habit is to write it somewhere else to handle another effect, because one function should only do one job. You don't want the function to do too many jobs at the same time. So we write a new function over here called handle filter active, which is also going to be an arrow function that equal to an arrow, and we have to know which filter has been clicked on, so we pass in the ID of that filter. And over here we do a mapping filters.map. We're going to map through all these filters. Write a function, map through each of the filter. First job is to set all filters active status to false. Right? Once we've done that, we're going to find out which one you have clicked on. So we use the if statement. If the filter's ID in the array actually matches the one that has been passed in as a parameter, basically means that we have found a matching. Alright? The one that you have clicked on matches something in my filter array. In that situation, I will set specifically of that filter active status to true. Alright? So this is how we handle it. After we've done the mapping, this filter is active. The one you click on will be set to true, but the remaining one will all be set to false. But how do we use this function? Because currently it's fading, we used it inside this handle filter change function. Because when you click on the filter, only one function can be called at a time. So this must be a sort of like a child function inside this parent function. So here we say the first thing, handle filter active ID. Because this ID has been passed in as a parameter, that's why we can use it over here straight away. It's all linked up logically. Alright? So once we've done that, we're going back to the browser and you click on it. You can see once I click on the app button, the app button's color maintains at blue. The remaining three all go to black. Same for the web, category, all. So everything's working. The filter is working. The color changing is working. The animation is working. And also the zoom in effect is working. Right? We get to see the modal of each individual image. Beautiful. However, this link probably is not going to be working. So far, if we click on it, it'll pop up with a 404 error, and that is because we have not yet built that individual page for that individual portfolio item. Remember, inside our component, if you go to the portfolio item, the second link will take you to the routes slash portfolio slash item ID, we have not yet created a page. We must have this page for this link to work. So let's just do it right now. For the portfolio single page, because we are building a separate page, we do not include it in the section folder or the component folder. Instead, what we're going to do, I close off the current folder so you can look at it more clearly. Inside app, we create a new folder called portfolio. This folder represents a separate page. If you want it to be a separate page, inside this folder, you must create a file called page.tsx. This page is like a Next.js defined name. If you name a file called page, the Next.js will find it out and treat it as a separate single page. All right, you cannot name it somewhere else. And also inside this folder, we create a new file called styles.css to build our styling file. So this page, we're also going to use the boilerplate RFC to create a boilerplate. And we know that this is going to be a client component because we have too many animations, also including the swiper. So we have that use state hook and also the use effect hook. We're going to build it as a client component. So we write use client at the top. And also for this page, we're going to include our styling files. So here we say import style.css, like so. And between that, I'm going to import all of those swiper library. We're going to import the swiper slide, the swiper CSS, pagination, autoplay, and the pagination module. The reason is because if you look at the original project, when you click on this one, it will have that carousel. This carousel with a bullet point is handled by Swiper, which is a third-party library. If you haven't installed Swiper yet, just have a look at your package.json. In our previous tutorial, at the very beginning of the video, we have installed the Swiper package upfront. If you haven't installed it, just npm install Swiper, do it now at your terminal. Once you've done that setup, the next job is going to change our name because this is not going to be a page name. We have to name it in a more detailed way and call it the portfolio details. Like so, something like that, all right? And we know that this thing is going to take a parameter. So we do an object destructuring params. And we have to define this data type. The params is going to be an object with the ID that is going to be a string. Okay. So now after you've done everything, you are allowed to take the parameters from the routes and use that params from the routes inside your body. So here, what we're going to do next, it's going to create a local variable called ID, and that ID equals to params.id. Oops. ID. Alright, so that's how we can fetch the routes parameter. Because remember, if you look at that portfolio item, when we click on the link in the portfolio item, we actually go to the page /portfolio/ID. This ID is dynamic. It's going to be the routes parameter. How do we get this routes parameter? We get the routes parameter in the portfolio detail page using the params. This is the built-in parameter in Next.js. You don't have to create it yourself. And the next job, what we're going to do is to do the data fetching from the backend. Say for example, we go to portfolio 3. We should have this third portfolio data in JSON. We're going to make the request to this and have the data ready in our detailed page. All right, that is going to be our next job. So what I'm going to do now is to set up a local variable to hold that data, like so. Item set item is going to be in the use state. And the next part is to write our data fetching function and also call that function using the use effect hook. I have shown you how to do this, which is going to be the very standard one. So now we just do a data fetching from the backend, localhost /3001/API/portfolio/ID. This ID is going to be the dynamic ID that we fetch from the routes parameter, and initially we create it over here. Okay, and then once we have the ID, we put it as a parameter inside our routes, so we can talk to this backend. Everything's dynamic. If the ID is 3, we get the item 3. If the ID is 4, we get item 4. Okay, so that's how we fetch from the backend. We convert it into JavaScript, reset the local state variable, and then call this function at the upfront when the component gets mounted on the DOM. That's all. And the remaining things is for me to put in our template. The template is quite simple. For that individual page, I delete this one and I put in this one. I'll explain it to you. So we create a section called portfolio details, wrap everything in the main, class name also portfolio details. Everything must be wrapped inside a container, and inside the container we have a row. Inside this row, we divide it up into 8 by 4 columns. On the left hand side, we're going to have 8 column, which contains the carousel. The right hand side, we're going to have the 4 column, which is the project information. For the carousel, we import our swiper, right? Set up the space between is 0 because we only have one slide at a time. The autoplay paste, the pagination you want to use, because we have give a class name to the pagination called Swiper-pagination. Here the element must match up because it's going to be in bullet point and clickable. We are using the autoplay and the pagination module. You want to make a loop for it, all right? And then the next job is do the data mapping. Everything must be mapped into the gallery, the swiper slides with the key of the index, and also inside the slide we want to hold an image. The image is going to be in the gallery image. If you look at this JSON, each object have a gallery property. The gallery property is an array, and that array contains the routes of each image. All right. So that's why we access the gallery property and we map that thing into image using the image itself, which is the string routes. Very simple logic. On the right hand side, we have a 4 column, and that contains the project information. And we want to show you the category, the client, the project, the date, the URL. This is up to you. If you have a different type of project information and now you want to fix the data based on your own demand, you can totally do so. You don't have to follow exactly what I type in. I'm just writing this for demonstration purpose. And your project might have more features, more properties that you want to present, and you can do in your own way. All right. And down here is just going to be in a property description. This one I leave it as a hard-coded bit, but you can also make it dynamic by just adding a project description as a property over here, so you can fetch it over here. All right. So that's going to be our template, a standard one. So once you've done this template, but pretty much it means that you have that individual page. And then one more thing is going to put in our starting file for that project detail. I copy and paste in the details. Quickly scroll up so you can have a look yourself. I'll save the time of explaining the CSS code because it's just quite a simple one. Change the color, change the weight, change the font size, adjust the margin and paddings. That's all. Yeah, it's not much really fancy stuff here. It's just all standard CSS code. So now we have that individual page on the portfolio folder. And if we go in here, let's try one, localhost /portfolio/1. We do have that. Must be localhost 3001. Yeah, we don't have that yet. Let's see what's going on now. We have that page here. Supposedly we should have that page ready. Yeah, I just found the reason. The reason is because I closed this view file. We're making a dynamic routes, but I forgot to build that dynamic folder, the Square ID folder, like what we did inside the API for the portfolio. If you want to make a dynamic route for each individual item, you must build a dynamic folder with a Square ID. Here is the same logic. For the page, dynamic page, you must make a folder called Square ID. Everything must be inside the Square ID for it to work. So what I'm going to do is to drag this to and move it into ID, like so. And hopefully this time it should be working. If we're going back to that page, yeah, it's there. As you can see, we're now on localhost 3001 /portfolio/1, and that thing's there. We have that example of portfolio 1. If we're going to 2, let's try 5. Yeah, this example of portfolio 5, and we have that gallery ID, gallery image, right? The reason why it looks the same is because I'm using the same gallery image for all projects. I don't have that much image, which is not the purpose of this project to demonstrate too many images. If you have your project image, you can use your customized image, by the way. Yep, everything's working now. All good. So now we're down the portfolio individual page as well, and close that off and have a look at the original project. This one. If you now refreshed it, we are now on localhost 3001, which is the one we are currently building. This GlightBox is working. the next one is also working. Okay, so now you can see the portfolio individual page as a modal on the home page instead of going to that page. If you do want to go to that separate page, that page is there. You can use it, right? But this is much better user experience because the potential employer will see your portfolio details on the same page. They don't have to go to another page and reload it. Okay, and this is much cooler. Once they finalize reading your detailed information, they can close anywhere to close it off, right? It's much cooler, and the filter button is working. Yeah, pretty much if you can do this, you have handled the highlights of this project, which is, I think, the most complicated thing in this project. Yeah. So now we're up to the portfolio. Our next section is going to be a server component, which is the service section. Let's just jump in and do it now. So to create this service section, what we're first going to do is to set up the data and also set up the API endpoints for that. So in our data file, open up the data, and then next to the portfolio, we put in our service data. And I'm just going to quickly go through the structure of the data, which contains the ID, the delay item, the delay time for animation, and the SVG path. Because as you can see, each service item got a very unregulated shape of the background, and that's going to be achieved by SVG, which is the path, and also the icon, the color, and the name, and the brief. So this is the structure of the service data, pretty standard. After we've done that, what we're going to do next is inside our API folder, create a new folder called services, and inside the services, we're going to create a new file called route.ts. So this is how we're going to write a new backend API endpoint for our services, and also we're going to create a GET request for it. So first thing to do is to import the services from the data file that we just built, and then we're going to export. It's going to be an async function, and with a GET, we do not need any parameters because we are not getting a single item, we are getting the whole array. So in return, we're going to say response.json, and we put in the services. Yep, like so. So we get request, get the data from the services, and put it onto the backend routes. And now if we're going back to our backend, let's just try it. Localhost 3001/API/services. Yep, the data has been served successfully. We can now use it. Once we have the API backend, our next job is to create that component. So we close off the API folder, and inside our section folder, we create a new file called services.tsx rfc to create that boilerplate. And what we're going to do next is to think about, are we going to build this one as a server component or a client component? Have a look at the original design. Does it include any user interactions or any on-click events, for example? No, it doesn't, right? It's just a demonstration course with different service you have, and some hover effect can be simply achieved by CSS, right? There's no user click events or scroll events or rearrange events, no events happening. So basically means that the local state of this entire section will not change whatsoever. That means we can build this one as a server component to make sure all the data is ready on the server side instead of the client side. Beautiful. So to achieve that, what we're going to do first is to write a async function. So we say async function with a function name called get services data, and we do not need any parameters, so we delete that one. And inside here, we're going to say const response equals to await. We're going to do a fetch from the backend. Fetch from where? From this backend routes we have just created. So we copy this API endpoint and paste it over there. Must be wrapped by the single quotes. So once we have the data ready, what we're going to do is to return this response as a JavaScript array. So we say response.json, like so. That's all, right? Because we are using an async function here, we're going to export by default a async function as well. And we know that to call that function, we do not need to write any use effect hook. We just simply create a variable called items, and that is going to be the empty array type of data, and we await this function to be called. That's all. So once we we trigger this function over here. We await the JSON data come back, and we assign that data to a JavaScript variable called items. All right. So that's all. Very simple. And the next job for us to do is to create a section template. So what we're going to do here is inside a return, we create a section and give the ID of the section, call it a services, and also the class name of services. So inside, we're going to write a container. This container is going to wrap everything. The first thing we want to wrap up is a section title, like we did before. So we say section title, and we know that the title of this section is going to be services. And then a brief is going to be the lorem paragraph. So what I'm going to do is just simply copy and paste in that lorem. So now the section is done. And before we go any further, what I want to do is to import this service section into our home page, so that we can know that this one is actually working. Services, import, and then we go to our home page to see if it's loading. Yeah, it's loading. So now we have that services with that paragraph down underneath. Basically means we have built this section successfully. Our next job is going to be the data mapping, because we're going to map all of those box cards. And we know that each card shares the same sort of a template, so it must be the child component that we have to build first before the mapping. So what we're going to do is inside the component, we create a new file called services item.tsx, enter, and then at the same time we create a new file called services item.css, enter, RFC to have that boilerplate ready, and then we import that / services item.css file. So this thing are combined together. All right. And next to it, we know that each child component is going to take that a property, and we're going to do the property destructuring and also define the variable type. So for each item, it's going to be a object, and we know that if you look at JSON, it has these properties of delay, SVG path, icon color, so on and so forth. So what we're going to do is just going to tell Next.js, I'm going to have a delay property, and that is going to be a string, and I will have the SVG path, and that is going to be a string as well, not strong. And I'm going to have the icon, which is going to be a string, and I'm going to have the icon color, which is going to be a string, and name string. This is going to be a good habit to have the data variable type, because it only takes that kind of a variable. If you want to put in anything that is inconsistent with the variable type you defined, and the code won't be working, right? This is more accurate. And once we have the data definition, data declared and defined, what we're going to do here is to set up the template for each individual card. And everything must be wrapped in a div, in a column of 4. So LG-4, I create something like that. But if it's on the middle screen, MD, I'm going to make sure it takes a half, so it's going to be 6. And display flex, and also align items, plural, stretch, so they can stretch out. Okay, so we have this bootstrap class name edit, and maybe it's a good habit to give some margin as well. So margin to top, give it 4. The bootstrap margin comes in scales from 1 to 4. 1 is the minimum, 1 to 5. 5 is the maximum, but we want to give it 4. So now we have the correct class name set up. And the next thing after it, inside this, what we're going to do is to create another icon box to hold it. So it's going to be icon box. Okay, and but we want to make this class name dynamic based on the color that has been passed in. As you can see, each box has a different color. Some of them comes in the blue, some of them comes in orange. So to make this class name dynamic, what we're going to do is rather than in the curly braces, put in the backtick, and we say icon box hyphen money sign double curly braces items dot icon color. Yeah, like so. So this icon box hyphen color is going to be handled by CSS. The CSS file will pick up this color and render the according color properly, right? So this is how we achieved it. And the next thing what we're going to do is going to be the icon itself, which is also included the SVG. To make things easier, I'm just going to copy and paste in the SVG with the path. As you can see, this path is loaded over here, which is going to be used to decide the shape of the SVG, which is irregular, but it looks pretty amazing cool, right? So that's that. So now we have the icon done. The next part is going to be h4, which is the title of the service. And inside h4, we're going to create an anchor tag. So this one goes nowhere, but inside it, if you want to build a separate page for your service, you can put in the link there. But so far, we just leave it in like that. So I'm putting the item's name. So we have the service name. Below that title, we put in the item brief. So this one is going to be item.brief. Yep, all done. So now we have the entire template for our service card. And the next job is going to be the CSS. In the CSS, copy and paste in and show you the most important part. First, we give some alignment and padding for the entire icon box, and we set up the height and width for the icon itself, the one in the middle. And then after that, we provide the styling for the SVG and the SVG path. As you can see as I go through, because we have a different color of the icon box, for each color, if it's blue, it shows the blue color. If it's orange, it shows the orange color. So this hyphen color is over here, hyphen color. And this color has been dynamically defined in our data file at the backend API. Blue, orange, that kind of thing. Okay, this is how you achieve the dynamic color. Everything's there, so I'm just going to slowly go through so you can have a look at it yourself. All right. That's all done, and yeah, pretty much our service item is like this. So what we're going to do now is close this to file, and going back to our parents component. Below that section title, we're going to do a new row, so div row, and then inside it, we're going to do some mapping. So we're going to say items dot map, and map them into that services item, that component. And we know that each item has a key, which is the ID. So it's the item.id, and also we're going to assign the entire item object as a property value to the child component. One last thing is that we haven't defined the property type yet for the item. So the easiest way is to go back to your component, this one, because we have defined it over here, and in the parents component they must match up. So what we do is here we say items. It's going to be like that, except we're going to add one more thing, which is the ID. It's going to be a number, like so. All done. All right. So we pass the item with all of these property data variables, and we pass that as the entire object to the child component. The child component take that property object is structuring and fetch all the values over here in the template. Very simple logic, right? So now we have our service done, and let me see if we do need any more CSS. Nope, all the CSS belong to the item. So if we're going back to our page, and if you look at the service, I refreshed it a bit. Yeah, we have that correct shape, except that the box itself is not correct. Let me see if I can do something to fix that up. It seems that I'm missing one letter over here. Align items is strange. That's a T before CH. Should be working now. Still not. Let's see if I have any more typos. Yep, I have just noticed that this one is supposed to be brief. Instead of EI, it's supposed to be IE. So that's why this one couldn't be fetched. So we have this one saved. And over here, this is supposed to be brief. So now the brief is accessible. And now if we're going back, yeah, everything's okay now. So previously we have a typo, that's why this brief is not showing. But once I correct the typo, everything loading correctly. So as you can see, this is a box with a shadow. When you hover on it, the shadow becomes stronger. but when you leave the mouse, the shadows goes away with very tiny effects. And also, when you hover on it, the SVG shape, the background color changes to the calling one, so which is really cool. Service section. And of course, you can create a separate link over here. Once the user click on the icon or click on the title, it takes the user to the service page. That's absolutely okay. But for this demonstration purpose, I just leave it like that. Alright. So now we have this whole thing done. Close off the service. And the next thing, have a look at the original. The next job for us to do is going to be a testimonial, and this is also going to be achieved by using the Swiper.js. Let's just jump in and do it now. So to create a testimonial section, what we're first going to do is also inside our data file. We firstly put in our testimonial data. As you can see, each testimonial object contains the ID, the content, the avatar of the user. And in a real project, if you don't have the avatar of the user, you can use a universal one, like the user profile avatar. And the client's name, the client's current working position, something like that. Once we have the data ready, the next job is for us to build a backend route for it, because we do want to fetch this testimonial from the backend or the database. So here, inside our API, we create a new folder called testimonial, plural. So enter, and inside that folder, we'll create a new file called routes.ts. Okay. So this is also going to be another GET request. So we import the testimonial data from our data file, and then we export a function. It's going to be an async function, and it's going to be a GET request. It's a GET all request, so we do not need any parameters. And in the end, we return response.json of that testimonial file. Okay, so now we have the backend routes ready. So if we test it on our localhost 3001/API/testimonials, hopefully we can have that. Yeah, all the data has been fetched at one time successfully. We now have the backend. So as soon as we have the backend ready, we are ready to build our component file. Inside our section folders, we create a new file called testimonial.tsx, RFC to create a boilerplate, and then quickly after that, we create another file called testimonial.css, and we want to link these two together. So import /testimonial.css. So all done. So that's the part. As you can see, if you go into the original project, each testimonial object is going to be a child component, right? They share the same template with the avatar, name, position, and also the comments. So we must build a child component to hold that testimonial item as well. So what we're going to do here is inside our component folder, we create a new file called testimonials item. Over here, create a file, testimonial item.tsx. Grab that name, enter, and quickly new file.css. Just to save a bit of time, I'm getting lazy. Excuse me on that. So now we have the item file, item component, and all the CSS file. For the item component, RFC, to have that boilerplate. And also you want to import /that.css. Change the first letter to lowercase. All done. Okay, so first we set up the component file, and then we start to build. And the thing to think about is because we have this carousel thing, we must use the Swiper.js to load it. So in our parent component, we are going to have to import a few hooks. One is the use state hook. The other one is the use effect hook. And we know that this is going to be a use client because it's client component as we're using the use state hook. And also, the second job is to import all of those Swiper settings, like so. So we import Swiper slides, the CSS files, the module files, and also our customized CSS is going to be added in the end, like so. And then the next job for us to do inside the component is going to do the data fetching in this line of code. So what we're going to do is to create a local state variable slice, plural, and that is going to be an empty array initially. Once we get the data from the backend and call this data fetching function, use the use effect hook, this local state variable will be reset. All right. After we've done all of these, the next job for us to do is going to create our child component. Oops, it looks like that I put the data fetching in the wrong file. My bad. I'm supposed to put it into the parents component. Let me just quickly move this thing over. So we move this 2 over, and we move this one over here, and then also the swiper thing. And also the data fetching items, because the mapping must happen in the parents component, like so. So now it has been changed over. Everything in our child component remain the same as before. Okay, but we need to build this one first, because our next job is to do the data mapping of the slides into our testimonials item. All right. So here in our child component, we're going to do the object destructuring, as we have done many times before. We're going to object destructor.item, and we know that for this one we must define its data type. So inside the curly braces, we say item is going to be an object with the ID, data type of number, and also the content is going to be a string, and the avatar is going to be a string as well, and the client is going to be a string. Last thing is going to be the position, which is going to be a string. Yeah, all done. So once we set it up, and the next job is going to be our template. So delete the original one, put in our template. It's going to be the testimonial item, loading our images, loading the client's name, the client's position, and also this is the box icon codes, the left quotes and the right quotes, so that you will have the double quotation over here. And inside the double quotation, we loaded the content of the message. All right. So now we have that child component, and at the same time, we want to put in the CSS for it. So in the testimonial item CSS, we put it in the starting file, which controls the size of the image, border radius 50 pixels, the font size of the title, subtitle, the double quotations color, all the things, the position of the quotation, and the paragraphs. Make sure it's italic, and for the bullet point, we also control it, so you can go through it and have a look at yourself. Right? Very standard thing. So now the child component has been built. We're going back to our parents component, and in our parents component, we're just going to delete this one and put it in our own template. So for this template, we're going to have the section named ID testimonials. The class name is the same. Everything must be wrapped inside a container, and we have a section titled testimonials, and then we have the swiper, which is the thing we imported over here. Inside the swiper, we set the features of the swiper with a speed of 600, autoplay 5000 time delay. We have that pagination bullet point class name swiper-pagination, and also we include the module of autoplay and pagination. We want it to be loop. And then we do the data mapping for the slides. The slides is getting from the backend API endpoint, this one. And then we map it into our testimonials item. I'm going to import this one. And then that one has been successfully imported as above. So now everything must be, the component itself must be wrapped into the swiper slides. After you do the mapping, the swiper should be working. Okay. Last but not least is the bullet point pagination button down the bottom. So if you have done everything correctly, this thing should be working. Last but not least, I'm going to put in the testimonials CSS file for the section header and also the carousel. Okay. So once we've done that, we're going back to our project and to see if it's working. Of course it's not, because we haven't included it into our homepage. So in our homepage, we say testimonials. we put that in, and this thing gets reloaded. Let's see if it's working. It looks like some errors happening. Let me double check. Yeah, our fetched route is supposed to be localhost 3001, not 3000. After I change that, I go back, reload the page. The testimonial swiper is in, okay, with that beautiful bullet point and the pagination, which is also clickable, this one. Yeah, Swiper.js is a very handy third-party library that is heavily used in the modern project. I strongly recommend you to know how to use this one, either in the vanilla JavaScript environment or using the React way, Next way, or Vue way, all the JavaScript frameworks. You need to learn how to use them on a different environment because it'll save you heaps of times. If you manually build this thing with vanilla JavaScript, you can, but you wouldn't be able to achieve that swipe effect in this smooth way. Very beautiful, huh? So now we have the testimonial section done. And if you look at the original project, the last bit, which is also a highlight for this project, which is the contact form, because this form incurs a form validation. If I fill in nothing, it wouldn't allow me to send any message. As soon as I start typing, this error message gone. Once you fill up all the messages, it should successfully send a post request to your backend API endpoint and have this contact message stored somewhere in your database. In a real project, the customer contact message should be sent to the manager or the administration team of the company and also stored in the database as well, because sometime in a day you probably want to do a big data analysis of the customer contact message to see what's the keywords in it. If a lot of people have raised a lot of issues or the same issues in the contact message, your system should have the capacity to pick that up. Alright, so that's why even though it's only the contact message, not only this message should be delivered by email to the manager of the company, but also this thing should be stored somewhere for further data analysis. Okay, so let's just make that a post request and a form validation for this project for now. In the future video, I might introduce more with the database connection, store these messages, and also maybe we're gonna run some big data analysis using Python or using the programming language R to do some data analysis to find out the trend or some routines in the messages for you to better learn or dig more value out of the client message. Okay, so let's just jump in and do the contact section for now. To create a contact section, what we're first gonna do is inside the section folder, create a file called contact.tsx rfc to have that boilerplate ready, and then at the same time we have that contact.css. Link this thing back to the component file, contact.css. That's all done. And the next thing, if you look at the contact page, you will notice that there's a left hand side and a right hand side. The left hand side is just the basic details of yourself. The right hand side is the form. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we must set up the template for the contact section first, and we're gonna say create a section and give that section ID, call it a contact, and also a class name of the same contact. Alright, and then after that we know everything must be wrapped inside a container for the Bootstrap project. Container, and inside a container, first thing we're gonna do is going to be the section title. So we say section title, and the section title we know it's going to be the h2, and we call it a contact, and that thing's done. So we've done the context, and after that it's going to be the one row. The row contains the left hand side and the right hand side. When you build your website, if you have the prototype in front of you, you probably know how to do it, but you still need to form the image inside your brain before you start to type how to arrange the layout. Okay, so we say div row, give a row, and maybe some margin to the top as well, and inside it we'll divide it up into a column on a large screen of 4 for the left hand side, and a column of 8 for the right hand side. So these two add up total will be 12 columns, which equals to 1 row. Okay, and for the right hand side we probably want to add a bit more margin to make it look decent. Margin to top 5. However, if it's on the large screen, we want to make sure the margin to top is 0. And On the left hand side, it's pretty much going to be our info. So what I will do, I'll just quickly copy and paste in the info that we want to load. It's quite standard. It's going to be our address, the email, and the phone with some icons and information. And these data are hard-coded into here. If you do want to have it dynamic or changeable, you can write things in the data files and load the data here. All right, but there's no much data mapping, so I just hard-code this data over here, which is okay for now. Once we've done that, the next part is going to be the CSS. So in the contact.css, what I will do, I'll put in the general setting for it. It's pretty much the CSS for the info part. Make sure the icon has been styled with the proper color, the shape, and also the hover effects. The title and the paragraph have been styled, the email, the phone, and the hover effects has been added in. Pretty standard stuff. So after I've done that, I want to include this contact section into our home page to see if there's any errors. Like so. And we're going to the home page. As you can see, that contact page has been added, and we know that this thing is supposed to be on the left hand side without any problems. When you hover on it, you will see that amazing hover effects. Okay, so now we are left to the right hand side, which is the form. The form itself is supposed to be a separate component. So instead of loading it all together in the contact page, even for this info, this part, you can wrap it and refactoring it into a separate component if you want. Okay, but the contact form is absolutely going to be a separate component. So what we're going to do is inside our component folder, create a new file called contact form.tsx, and then we're going to create another file called contact form.css. Okay, so close this one, RFC to have that boilerplate, and then we want to import back / contact form.css. Yeah, all things has been linked up. The contact form is the highlights of this project, and we know that we're going to import that form over here. So we say contact form over here. So once you import it, if you look at it, yeah, it's there, right? Basically means that our contact form, this text words can be shown on the browser, and that means the importation is correct. And now the job gets down to how do we write this form, how do we handle the form validation, and all those sort of stuff. How do we handle the form information post request, that kind of things, right? So what we're first gonna do is to set up few hooks. One of the hooks is the use effect hook, use state hook, because there's gonna be a lot of state changes on this form. While the user is typing, it's going to be a onChange event. While the user is clicking the form button, it's going to be the onSubmit event. As long as we have those user interactions with the DOM, we have to use the client component, not the server component. So we say use client, like so. And the first thing I want to do is to put in our initial values for some data. So we say const initial states. These are going to be some initial states for our input box. Remember that we have too many input boxes, your name, email, subjects, message. The initial states of these are all going to be the empty string. Okay, very easy to understand. And then I'm going to create a local state variable. I will call it a text. After all, we are handling the text change, so it doesn't matter which text. So we say text, set text, and that equal to use the state hook. The initial value of them is going to be the initial state, right? So we load this thing as the initial value for the text. The text itself is the object that contains all this property and value. That's one thing. The next job is going to be our form. So inside our return, I delete this one. We're going to create a form with a class name called contact form. Yep. So we're not going to have an action over here because we do want to have a onSubmit function. This form should have a onSubmit, and that equals to the function of handle submit. So what we're gonna do here above is to say we have the const handle submit form equals to an arrow function. So we have this one, and then we copy that in. So whenever the form gets submitted, this function will be triggered. If you want to have any post request, the post request code should be written inside this function. Alright, so that's one thing. And inside that form, what we want to do is to have the one row. So we create a one row, and in each row we're going to have a different type of information. Say for example, first one we're going to have a column md equals to 6, and that is going to be a form group. Yeah, something like that. And inside here we're going to create an input box to hold the user's information, right? So that input box, the type is going to be text. We have no problem. And have a look at the original design. It is going to be your name, right? So we say the name of it is going to be your name, and the value of it, we're going to do a two-way binding. The value of the input form is supposed to come from your local state variable, which is the text. So we say the value of it should be text.name, which is the first one. So far it's an empty string, and that's why we'll leave the input box to be an empty string. And the next thing to do is the placeholder. We probably want to say your name. And last but not least, it's going to be the onChange. OnChange is that whenever the user starts typing, basically there's going to be the onChange events occurred to that input box, and we want to handle that onChange events by writing a separate function from the outside. So here we say const handle text change, and that is going to be another arrow function, handle text change. And we know that whenever the user changed it, it's going to trigger the events, the onChange events, and that we have to define that variable as events. If the events does not ready, it can be any. So it's like a mixed data type. It could either be the events. If events not exist, we can use any type of data. All right. So now we have that inside our input box. We're just gonna call this function, right? So whenever the user starts to type, the onChange events will occur. This handle text change function will be working to handle the local state variable changes, right? If the value of the local state variable changes, and that thing will be binded back to the input box in the value. This is what we call the two-way binding. All right, very important concept in form handling. And then how do we handle the text change over here? It's like we're first gonna do the object destructuring with a const. We want to do the object destructuring of name and value, these two property, from the events.target. The events.target is the one that we are start to typing. Say for example, if you start typing inside this input box, this will be your target. And inside here, it has two property. One is called name, one is called value. So here we can do the object destructuring of these two property, name and value, from the target, right? And then once we have that, we're going to reset our local state variable. So we say set text. How do we do that? First, we're going to have to do the spread operator to copy the existing text words, because we do not want to overwrite the existing text inside our local state variable. And then we only want to update the value that has been changed. So we say in JavaScript, we pick up the property that you want to change and give that a new value of it. Okay, so this square bracket with the name allows you to dynamically select which one you want to use. Okay, so that's it. Because we have the name equals to name, so the first one, if you're targeting at the name input box, this one will be selecting name. The second one, when it goes to email, the name will be equal to email, and you'll be targeting at email, which is the second property, and the value will be changed to whatever value that has been passed in here. Okay. And one last thing, after we update that, we also want to, whenever the user starts typing, we want to make sure the validation goes to empty string. The reason is because the validation string is used to handle the error message or some warnings. And the user starts typing, we should make sure all the warnings and error messages goes away. So validate, that thing is going to be an empty string. Okay, oops, this thing is supposed to be inside our object, not outside. So comma. That. So that's how we handle the text change. Very, very handy. So now if you're going back to our project and you reload it, you have that name here. If you start to type, you can see these things working without any problem. Okay, so that's that. And as soon as we have that one done, the remaining job is going to be very easy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste this entire name input box. Copy that. And then paste it over here. It's also going to be a column of 6 form group, but for this one we probably want to add some margin. Say margin to top, give it a 3, but margin to top on the middle screen, give it to 0. The reason is because when it's responsive on the mobile phone size, all the columns, all the forms will not be listed horizontally. There's only going to be one row on the mobile screen. We want to make sure there's sufficient margin between them. And this one it's going to be a text message that has no, going to be an email message actually. The name of it is going to be a email as well. And to make the things look beautiful, we probably want to put in the class name for each. Say for example, class name, maybe that's going to be a form control. This is the Bootstrap thing. If you want to have now standardize the Bootstrap form and you write in form control, it'll start it for you. So we write that in. And here we just say that your email and the text.email all change. So this is the beauty of it. So when you look at it, now the name changes to email. When you pick up the property name over here, when it comes to the email part, this one will be email. And we want to reset the text in terms of the email to the value that has been changed in, right? So now we're going back, you can see that email is there. Everything's working and the style looks much better. This one is working, okay? So now that's all good. And the remaining thing on the next one is going to be the subject. So what I'm going to do the easiest way is copy this one. And outside this row, because this row only contains 2 things, we write this one. And that is going to be our subject. But the subject, I do not want it to take 6 columns. I want it to take the whole row and with a bit of a margin to the top in the form group. And this one is going to be a text to handle the subject. And this one changes to subject. And that one is going to be a subject. Handle change. And this one, the text was changed to subject without any problems. Okay, and now you're going back, you can see this one's there, it's working. If you can type inside this box, that basically means that you have set up correctly for the two-way binding. If you cannot smoothly type up letters, that basically means your two-way binding could be problematic. And the last thing, I'm just going to copy and paste in our message. So this one is going to be our message part with a row of 5. As you can see, we are all using the same sort of a function to handle the text change, which is amazing, right? You don't have to write function for each. This one function over here will handle the text change for each input box or text area. And now this one is working as well. Cool, beautiful. So pretty much we have done the main job. And the last but not least, we're going to put in the submit button. Like so. So text center, we put in the submit button, send messages, and if you're going there, it's there. Okay. So far the form looks pretty ugly because we haven't put in the CSS yet. So going to the contact the form CSS, what I'm going to do is to put in this. Make sure the contact the form stretch out to 100%. Give them a proper padding to the bottom. The error message, the warning message, the send message, the loading, I'm going to create those messages in a real quick time. And for the input box, so make sure you have all of those starting for the height and padding. For the submit button, make sure you have the correct background color and also hover effect. Okay, so after you've done this styling for the contact form, make sure you include it over here. And then you're going back, you will see this contact form looks very the same as before. Maybe I refreshed a bit. Yep, that looks not bad. And our next step is to put in the validation message above the send message button. Over here, I want to put this in. So give a bit of a margin to the top on the vertical, and we say that depending on the text state, the validation status, if it's loading, we're going to run the loading. If it's incomplete, we're going to pop up with the error message, ask the user to put in the all the details. If it's a success, we're going to show up the send message and telling the user that everything's okay. If it's an error, we're going to pop up with an error message. Alright, so this is like a dynamic presenting of the warning message or success message. But how do we achieve this validation result with the loading incomplete, success, and error? And that is going to be handled by the function above. Okay, whenever we make the function to the above, we have to do things. So the last step is going to be our handle form submission, and inside here we're also going to be taking the events or any, like so. First thing is going to be events.prevent default, prevent default, like so. Otherwise the page will get reloaded. If we prevent default, the page will not be changed or reloaded. And the first bit, we're going to do a simple form validation like so. So we say if any of the value is empty string, we're going to set the text message, the validation status to incomplete, and return from this function, so the form will not be submitted at all. And this is how we change the local status. If once this one gets turned on to incomplete and it comes down to the error message, this one will be shown. If it's incomplete, the message will ask you to fill in. Let's just try it. So far we're on here. Maybe I reload it a bit. If I send, yeah, you can see that error message pops up. As soon as I start to type, that error message goes away. And the reason is because in the onChange function, as soon as we start to type, the validate will be changed, will be reset to empty string. That's why the error message goes away. Okay, and that's one thing. The other thing is going to be in a contract API. So we're going to make a post request. So the next thing we're going to handle is going to be the post request sent to contact API. So to have that API, inside the API folder, we create a new folder called contact to handle that. And then we need a new file called route.ts, like so. Close this off. For this route, it's going to be slightly more complicated than the typical GET request that we get. I'm still going to write the GET request like so. This is how we did before. But we need some data, some sample data from the data file, just for demonstration purpose. So in the data file, what I'm going to do is to create a sample contact data for you to see how the contact data is supposed to look like. So over here, I put in, so the contact data will contain ID and the contact details, the message details. The message details will have all of those properties from the form, the name, email, subjects, and the messages, right? This is example one. So once we have that, we close this off, and we can do a trying to get request to the contact API, and now you have that sample contact message there. Just assume that this one is from the database, one existing contact message, okay? And now I'm going to make a post request to the backend. Supposedly you should have two messages loading on your backend, all right? Two objects. How are we gonna do that? We're gonna write a post request instead of the get request. We're gonna have another route handler inside our API to handle the post request, like so. So when the user makes the post request, we're gonna take that request, and then that request is going to be converted into the JavaScript array that contains the JavaScript object, and we store that information into a message. We want to delete the validate property, because remember, in our contact form, the initial states for each message or each thing that we posted, it should have the validate property, but these things only be used on the DOM for validation purpose. It's pointless to store this one in a database. That's why we delete that property. And then we create a new object. This new object will have the new ID. Depending on how long the existing ID is, we'll find the existing contact, the array length, and add 1. If the existing array only have one item, and now you will have the ID of 2, okay? So, and the detail is going to be the message that we get from the post request. And then the next job is for the existing contact array, we'll make the push request, okay? We push that new message object into it. And then in the return, we'll return the new response with a JSON format data with a header content type JSON and showing the status of 201. 201 means that the post request has been made successfully. This is this post request is built depending on the kind of data you use, because we are using the local static data to serve as our database. In the real world, you can still write the same sort of code like this, but instead of push it into our current array, you might want to do an insert to your SQL. If you're using SQL as your database, this line is supposed to be the insert. I write it as a comment, like so. So it should be the insert to SQL. If you're using the MongoDB, you should add to MongoDB as well. So it's depending on what database you use, but here is the kind of a line to talk to the database to update the database status, okay? But the remaining code is okay. Well, so once we've done that, the post request routes handler is there, and it leaves to us to handle the form over here. The remaining code is just going to be the post request itself. And what I'm going to do is to put in my code like so. Inside this code, we're using the try-catch block. We try to make the post request. If we catch any errors, we're going to show that errors on our DOM. As you can see, there's some error lines here. That's because we are using the await. Whenever you use the await inside a function, you must make that function to be an anonymous function. So this one has to be anonymous function, and that error goes away. And we know that the post request route is going to be the localhost 3001/API/contact. And when we make that method post request, the content is going to be application JSON. The body of the request, which contains the data, is going to be our text. Essentially, we are sending our local state variable, the text message, the text, as the body of the request. We're using that JSON stringify to turn it into the JSON format. And once we make that post request, because we haven't got any response yet, we're going to temporarily set the local validation status to loading. If it's loading, it's going to show the loading message. And as soon as the post request has been made successfully, we're going to have that response back and convert it into the JavaScript. If the JavaScript come back, we'll set the local text message, the validation status to success. Basically means we get a response from the post request. The response has been made successfully. And you can do now to console.log success of that result. In a real project, you don't have to write this line. In a real project, you don't have to console.log all of those things. However, if in the process we catch any errors, we're going to update our local validation status to error. So this success error loading is corresponded by the following DOM condition. So loading will be showing this message, success will be showing this message, error will be showing this message. Okay, so that's all happening at the post request sending time over here. So now we have done this thing. Let's just see if we can, based on this, make a successful post request. First, when you want to send a request, without filling any details, it's going to pop up with error. And then, soon as you start typing, say for example David, and I'm going to send it from my email, subjects, it's going to be some test sub subject and message. Just going to be some random letters that I type in. And then once I filled up all the information, I send a message. As you can see, this thing has been successfully posted. And I'm going back to here, and I reload. As you can see, the thing I just sent has been successfully shown in our RESTful API endpoint at the backend. That basically means that this thing has been successfully added into our data file for temporary basis. If it's a database, this thing will be inserted into our database. Okay. But I do notice one error is that when I make that post request, our page gets reloaded. Let me see what's the error there. It wouldn't supposed to be that error. Yeah, I think something wrong here with the catching. After I refresh the page for a couple of times and I repost the form, the page wouldn't be reloaded. I think it's just something wrong with the catching. But anyhow, there's nothing wrong with our code. All good. So now we have finalized the building of our contact form. This is another highlight of this project. In the future project, I will probably, in the routes part, adding in the code for database connection and how do we talk to the database, that kind of things. But it's just one-step things, quite simple, right? You should be ready for that. All right, and let's have a look at the original project where we left off. We're only left with one more thing, which is the footer and also a back to top button, and also the navigation animation. in the original project, whenever a navigation button you click on, it should take you to that section straight away without affecting the route's name. Okay, so now 3 more things to do: footer, back to top button, and the navigation click on events. Let's just jump in and do those things right now. So for the last bit, the first thing I'm going to build is the footer component. So inside the component folder, we say footers .tsx, enter rfc, have the boilerplate, and then again footer.css, import that thing back, import /footer.css, all done. And for the footer, it's just going to be a very standard HTML template. So to save you some time, and I'm just going to copy and paste in. As you can see, we use a footer tag to wrap everything with the ID of footer, and inside it we're going to have a container. The first part is going to be your name, your brief description, and then you put in your local, your social media links, and then the last bit is going to be your copyright. Of course, this is my work, so I put my copyrights there, but once you customize it, you can put in your own. And for the CSS, I'm going to quickly copy and paste that in as well. So with some background of that light gray, make sure you have the correct font size for the title, for the paragraph. For the social link, we also want to make sure we have the background of the blue, the hover effects, and the copyrights and credit. Okay, pretty standard thing. Once you have set those things up, and have a think about where to put this footer. If we put this footer on the home page, it's probably going to be inappropriate because we are building a multiple page website. As you might notice, we have that portfolio page for each one, right? So the footer is supposed to be shown on every single page. Therefore, the best place to put this footer is in our layout below the children. Above the children is the header, below the children is the footer, so the children will be wrapped inside. So here we say footer, get that in. Once it's reloaded, as you can see, the footer is there. If we go to another page, say for example /portfolio/file, we're loading that on a separate page, the footer is still there, as you can see. Yeah, this is the beauty with that layout. Even though you click this thing on the over here on the portfolio page, show it at the Modal, it will still load that footer because the footer is in that page. Okay, really cool. And the next job for us to do is the back to top button. So here, inside our components, we create a new file called back to top button.tsx, and also new file back to top. Oops. Back to top button.css. Okay, just copy that name. And now you probably want to close out the footer thing. RFC import that back /CSS back to top button. So the back to top button is actually quite a simple job. What it does is that you need to identify the position of your scroll. You do not want to show the back to top button up front. Say for example, I'm at the hero section, the back to top button at the corner should disappear. Whenever I scroll down a bit to a certain position, that button appears. Okay, so the only magic for this button is to identify the scroll position of the page. How do we achieve that? So inside here, what we're going to do is we're going to import the use state hook and also the use effect hook. And the above, we say use client. And because we are using the use client use state, we're going to set up the local state variable. And that is going to be scroll and set scroll. Use state hook. Initial value is going to be 0 because initially it's going to be at the top of the screen, which is 0. And then we're going to use the use effect hook to identify the position of our scroll, like so. So we add an event listener scroll to our window. Whenever we start to scroll, the window will identify the new scroll position on a vertical basis and update our local state variable scroll. So our local scroll variable, the value, will constantly change based on your scroll behavior. Okay, that's like that. And we're gonna write another function called back to top. When this button gets clicked on, we should have a function to take the user back to the top. To take the user back to the top, we write window.scroll to top. Top means 0, 0. That means horizontally, vertically, both 0. And the template of the button is quite straightforward. We'll delete this one. Put this in. So it's going to be an anchor tag. Anchor tag with the on-click events take you back to the top. And also, for the appearance and the disappearance of the anchor tag, it's going to rely on the position of the scroll. If the scroll is beyond 100 pixels, we're going to turn on the active status added into the class name. Otherwise, this class name will not be shown. Okay, and then we put in that the bootstrap icon for the arrow. So once we've done that, we're going to style it like so. The key thing is that make sure the position is fixed down the bottom. Give them a really high Z index so it will overflow all other elements, and give a certain height and weight. As you can see, this active is an amazing thing. Initially, it's going to be hidden with opacity 0. As soon as we add on the active status, the class name, the visibility is going to be visible, opacity 1. That's how you make it disappear and appear. So once we've done that, the next thing to think about is where to put it. We want it to show on every single page as well, so the best place, same logic, is going to put it on the layout file. Back to top button, done. And then we're going to our current project. You can see this thing has been added. If you click on it, it goes to the top and that thing disappear. Scroll down a bit, that thing appear. Go above, that thing disappear. Alright, so one more feature has been added on. Last but not least, I want to focus on and also highlight for the project, which is this navigation click on events. Instead of using the old way, like using the ID to take the user to different section, we use a fancier way, which is the JavaScript to handle it. So close off your current file, and I want you to go to the one that we built previously, which is the navigation, because we're going to add a bit more code to here, which is this one, handle scroll to. We have read this function in our first tutorial, but we didn't fill the content. Now is the time to finalize it. First, we're going to add in a few more importations for this page, and we're going to import some path object, like so, from the next navigation, because we're going to find out the routes, the router, and the path. And then the next thing we're going to do is to set up a few more local state variable. So we're going to need the path name of our current page, and also we're going to use the router to redirect the user to different pages. And we're going to set up a few more local state variable. One of them is the open, because on the mobile side, say for example this one, if I turn on the mobile side, this thing should have the open facility. I click on it, the navigation should pop up from the side. Click again, that thing should go away. But so far, our current project does not have that. As you can see, the navigation is not there. We have to consider about the mobile view as well. So that open local variable is for that mobile view. And also another one is going to be a scroll, because we do need a scroll position to decide whether the navigation should be active or not. Okay, so we set up a few more. And the next thing to do is to handle that scroll events. When the user click on the navigation, this function will be triggered. And one parameter gets passed in is the section name that you want the navigation to take you to. Okay, it's going to be a string. And to do so, inside this function, what we're going to do, I put it in, is something like this. We're going to first find out which is the target section you want the navigation to take you to. More than likely, it's going to be the query selector with the hyphen, with the and the section name. Right? We'll find out the section name based on the ID. As you can see, for each section, say for example, each section have that ID. Right? We based on this using that query selector to find it out. And once it's found it out, we assign that HTML element as our target element. If we are on the home page, this path name is what we imported over here. Over here, it will automatically identify which path you are on. If you are on the home page, basically means that your path is going to be in a single slash. On the home page, we're going to find the element position offset top, which means the top of that section. And the window will take you to the top of that section, and with a smooth behavior. Otherwise, if you're on a different page, we're going to use the router to push you back to the home page and take you to that section. I hope I make myself clear. Okay, so this is the logic. If you're building a single page website without another page, you don't have to write this else. The above one is sufficient. Okay, so that's the handle scroll to function. Let's see if this is working. Try it out. About, take me to the about. Resume, take me to the resume. Portfolio, service, contact, about, resume, portfolio. Yeah, everything works. So for me, it looks all okay. There's nothing wrong with it. It will take me smoothly to that section, right? So I repeat the logic again. First, you're using that query selector to find the section and assign it to a variable, which is the HTML element. And then you find the top position of it. And then you're using that window scroll tool to take you to the top of it. Okay, that's the logic. However, you do notice one problem. In our original project, whenever you go to that section, this thing should be turned to blue, which means only one section can be active at a time. Either you click on it to change it to blue, or you scroll to that position of portfolio, and this one will change to blue as well. So we need to identify which section is actually we are on, supposed to be active. And the way to do so is that we have to know the scroll position. This is why I set a local state variable scroll. And we're going to use that use effect hook to identify the scroll position. Whenever you use the scroll behavior, we're going to add the events listener to that scroll and update the local state variable to the scroll position. Okay? And the next job is going to handle the active navigation by writing another function like so. This one, handle nav active. First, we're going to find out the current scroll position at 200 because we do want to have a bit of a space to the top, and then we're going to have to identify in our current navigation list. If you look at our data, this one, in the navigation, each one will have an active status. The first one has been set to true by default, remaining all false. Whenever the user scroll, we have to identify which one is on. So the first thing we do the mapping is to set all the active status to false. And then we find our target using the query selector. We find our navigation target. And if, this is the key point, if our target section is within that range, basically means within the top and the bottom of the target section, we're going to turn that navigation active status to true. So I show it in the real work. When I scroll this page, I scroll to that section, I will have the scroll position of the page all the time. If that scroll position is within the top and the bottom of my target section, this navigation should be set to true. Okay, so that's the logic behind it. And you might notice that this function is fading because it has been never used. That is because this function will be called whenever we scroll the page. It's not an on-click event, it's on-scroll events. So how do we do that? We write another use effect hook below this. Depending on the current scroll position, whenever we scroll the page, we're going to call this function, and this function will measure where is your scroll position currently is. If it's within that specific section, and the navigation for that section will be turned on to true. Otherwise, it will stay at false. Okay, so this mapping function will map through all the sections, find out the height and the bottom of each, and locate your page scroll position to see if it's within that section range. Okay, this is the logic behind it. And we know that here for the anchor tag, only the active one will be added with the active class name. Otherwise, it's undefined. So once we've done that, we're going back. As you can see, I might just reload it. As soon as we start to scroll to the about, this thing has been turned on to active. Once we leave the about, that one goes to nothing. As soon as we reach the resume, here, this one has been turned to active. The click events works okay. It doesn't really matter which one you click. Once you click on it, the scroll position will match the range of the section. This active status will still be turned to true. Okay, so this is the logic behind it. A really, really cool design, huh? I like this. It will make your browser so clean. It's a magic way of handling the page scroll. I like it so much. Alright, so far we have pretty much done 99% of the project. One last thing I want to do. If you look at the mobile view, everything looks all decent, nothing to change. It looks perfect. This is because we designed this website using a Bootstrap framework. Everything is responsive, except that navigation button is missing. So what I want to do in the end is to have one more function to handle that. So below this, we have one more thing called handle toggle menu, and the way to do so is that we find the body tag and toggle with a class name called mobile navigation active. As soon as we have that, the button should appear. Okay, so let's just try it. Oh, we haven't added a button yet down the bottom. So what I want to do now is below that link, put in this one. We have to put in that hamburger button, which is the mobile toggle button, and give it on-click events. This thing will be shown on the mobile view, as you can see it's there. Once you click on it, if you look at the body will be added a new class name. I click again, that class name goes away. I click on, that thing's there. Okay, it's called a mobile navigation active. That class name gets removed off. That class name gets added on. This is a Bootstrap thing. As soon as that class name added on, this navigation will show. Okay, really easy to handle. Now everything's done. So that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you do like my tutorial, please subscribe my channel, like it, share it, and if you do have any comments or questions, please leave a message down below. I'm more than happy to answer it. Otherwise, I will see you all in the next video to show you more amazing project. Thank you all for watching. Bye for now.